The Mitch Marner saga takes another turn as Brandon Carlo and Scott Laughton try to find their footing with a new team. Hey everyone, welcome to Inside the Leafs. Rob Wong, joined alongside by Toronto Sun Maple Leafs writers Terry Koshan and Lance Hornby. And it seems like there's never a dull moment when you talk about Mitch Marner these days. We found out over the weekend that the Maple Leafs had asked Marner if he would waive his no-trade clause to go to Carolina as part of a Mikko Rantanen trade, Terry. He obviously declined, and since then we've had Brad Treliving come out to do some damage control, and you've had Marner score a shootout winner against Utah. There's a lot to unpack there, Terry, but what do you make of it all at a time when the Leafs are trying to compete for an Atlantic Division title?
Well, if you're the Maple Leafs and Brad Treliving, you have to do your due diligence. And when your due diligence includes asking a guy this question, your star player, I think it's got to be done. And the reason why, because you don't have him under contract. And you think you can get the only comparable on the open market, Mikko Rantanen, under contract. And of course, this didn't happen because, Marner didn't waive his no movement clause. But it's all part of the business. You have to take that shot, I think. If you think there's any possibility that you'll lose Marner for nothing come July 1, and certainly the longer this goes out of contract, I think that likelihood increases. Having said that, the fact that Marner doesn't have a deal or anything, it's not really surprising. This is the way these things work, and this is the way that Darren Ferris works. So, I would like to think there aren't any hard feelings that come out of it. If you're on Mitch Marner's side, you might say, okay, well, maybe I am a little bit ticked off, but you also have to look at the other piece of it and say, well, it's kind of going to be expected if you're not under contract. And like I said, can possibly go free July 1. So we'll see where this all goes now. But, I don't know if how much of a distraction it's going to be between now and the playoffs. There's been a good job done on both sides of keeping things, under the surface all season long. Not that there's much going on negotiation wise, but yeah, we'll see where it goes. But right now, I think for me, you take them each side for their at their word. Treliving wants to re-sign Marner to a long-term deal, and Marner reiterated over the weekend that he wants to be a Leaf. So we'll see.
Well, I think it was a distraction that never really went away. It's been there. I think, certainly us in the media, to pat ourselves on the back, did our part. It was not, something that was brought up. He asked that it not be an everyday, an everyday topic in press conferences, and people have, more or less kept it that way. I would say what happened to this whole thing. This is a question to Marner and the general public. What happened to seeing what this guy does in playoffs, and then using that as your barometer as to whether or not this guy gets a new deal? I mean, now the distraction came up. As Terry says, it behooves Brad Treliving to take a look at what's out there. If he doesn't have a star player under contract, I don't think there's going to be any hard feelings. But this is a distraction that's sort of been out there, and now, of course, more people are paying attention, because there is a lot of people out there who aren't going to see or take the Leafs at face value until they see what they can do in the playoffs. So I think it's going to be a distraction from here on, right to July 1st. And Marner, I guess Marner's doing his part by playing some pretty damn good hockey, and that's only going to ramp up the pressure to get him signed long term here, if indeed that is the Leafs' plan.
I don't really think it's going to be distraction wise until we get into the playoffs. And if the Leafs are down 3-2 in a best of 7 going into game 6 or 7, and Marner hasn't done much, because like we've seen, it hasn't been one all year, and Marner's just gone out and done his thing and been one of the best players in the league. So we'll have to see where it goes, but certainly it ramps up now. There's no doubt. And the other thing that the Leafs are, they're considering is there's no one on the open market on July 1 who comes close to Marner. It was Rantanen. He's gone. And so you don't sign Mitch Marner. You can spread that money around all you want. You're not getting a player of his caliber.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for sure when you've got that elite high-end talent in Marner potentially walking out the door for absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, Brandon Carlo, Scott Laughton, Lance, and now Toronto Maple Leafs. It's been a couple of games under their belt. I mean, in their defense, they haven't had many practices with their new teams, but what have been your impressions of their first few games in the blue and white?
Yeah, they looked, excuse me, a little lost out there, but that's to be expected, especially when you fly, halfway back around the around the continent, and then kind of get thrown in. There's some people thrive on it, but they join the Leafs at a very a very interesting time right now, and interesting too that they had to have a team meeting, I guess, after the first game to try and get used to everything. And maybe that's a good thing that they see right away that see a bit more of what Craig Berube ticks. But individually, what not to like about Brandon Carlo, like plus 129 or something like that, 72 playoff games. That is a lot that he's going to bring to this defense once he gets acclimatized, whether it's with Morgan Riley or whomever. I think too much is made of the fact that Laughton is from Toronto. I'm getting, after whatever amount of time, you've seen a lot of Toronto guys come back here, and sometimes that's not the magic elixir. Not to say that he doesn't know people like Max Domi-Well or some of these other guys, but certainly I like him as a third line center. I think he can contribute a lot again once he gets a bit more acclimatized. So, kudos to Brad Treliving for filling the two holes that needed to be filled. And now, obviously, with the next game against Florida, starting 3 against them, it's going to be a very good barometer of what these guys can do. There's some big games coming up, a first place battle. Both these guys are out of the playoffs. They wanted to be back in a situation where they could contribute, and couldn't ask for anything better as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, we'll see. That it's going to be interesting. Just on the games against Florida, those 3 games will decide first place in the Atlantic. I don't think there's any doubt. The 3 head-to-head matches, but it'd been bumpy start for the 2 of them, but that's to be expected. You're, like Lance says, you're getting thrown right into something. A lot of travel involved on Friday. You play the next day, no practice, and you get right back at it on Monday nights. In Utah. So, the Leafs will practice today and they'll get a little bit more acclimatized to the surroundings here in Toronto. I think it's nice now that the Leafs are home for 4 in a row and each of them can get a little more comfortable in their surroundings that way. With Carlo, I'm curious to see how this all goes with Morgan Riley. You don't want to say there's no choice but to make it work, but there almost is. Riley's played with everybody else. The McCabe-Tanev pairing's going, that's going to stay put once Tanev gets back. I think we can be pretty sure of that. And then, so you want Carlo and Riley to find a good mesh there. And then as far as Laughton goes, yeah, great pickup for the third line center. That's his spot. Who he starts the playoffs with, we'll have to see. Does this, tryout, if you will, with Max Domi bear some fruit? There's still a lot of games to be played before we can make that decision. Then what happens on the other side of that line. But overall, I like both pickups. Neither one is a rental, which Brad Treliving wanted to avoid. Prices aren't cheap, of course. First rounders going at the door. And, Lance, you'd probably agree Fraser Minton's going to do good things to the Boston Bruins down the line. I mean, we expected that of him in Toronto, so why wouldn't we expect him to do it in Boston? But, it's the price that the Leafs are willing to pay now, and we'll see how it pays off. But, overall, I like the 2 additions, and I think they're both going to bring something once the playoffs get going.
And quite briefly, Terry hit the nail on the head. This team is going to look a lot different when Chris Tanev is back there and you have your 3 set defensive guys.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that the Maple Leafs have missed him in the lineup, and hopefully he can return sooner rather than later. But a big game coming up on Thursday against the Florida Panthers. Of course, first place continues to be on the line in the Atlantic Division. As always, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. For Terry Koshan and Lance Hornby, I'm Rob Wong. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.